Hi, I'm Kim Drumgo, and you are joining the Human Intelligence series of the Association. And today we're going to be talking about introversion and extroversion. I have here with me Claire Jeffries, who is the lead manager of academic and student engagement at the Association. So Claire, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So this is going to be an exciting conversation because we're going to talk about introversion and extroversion. So first, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about introversion. So tell us, what is an introvert?
So if I can back up for just a moment and clarify what introversion and extroversion means, because I think a lot of people get those things confused.
Absolutely.
It's really about how you operate in the external world, and it's a lot about how you interact, engage with others, and about how you get your energy and recharge. So those are kind of the basic fundamentals. Introversion and extroversion actually show up in traits in any personality assessment you'll take.
Got it.
So they're pretty key fundamentals of personality. So introverts, I guess the core thing I would say about introverts is that they think and they process internally. They tend to recharge by spending time alone, by they better understand how they feel about the world and understand it by reading or writing or reflecting. Those are the key things I would say about introverts.
All right. So introverts are more internal thinkers. And so tell me how the extroverts differ.
Sure. Good question. So extroverts differ in that they tend to think and process externally. They're really re-energized and recharged by being around people. And extroverts, I think a key thing about extroverts is that they often say they don't know what they're thinking until they hear themselves say it out loud, which can sometimes be a bit annoying and frustrating to introverts that they work with. But they really do that same process that introverts do internally. Extroverts do externally by verbalizing with others.
Excellent, excellent. So, for the audience out there, how can they tell that they're an introvert or an extrovert? I mean, because the definitions can kind of get cloudy sometimes. So how can you tell if you're an introvert or an extrovert?
Sure. Well, Kim, do you think that you are an introvert or an extrovert?
I know that I'm an introvert. I'm pretty confident I'm an introvert.
Okay. All right, great. So I would like to do something. I like to call it a 10-second test.
Okay. All right.
So I am going to ask you a question, and I would like you to not respond for 10 seconds. So we're going to practice it right now.
All right.
Okay? So what, how did you decide that you're an introvert? What was the thing that really tipped you off and made you recognize that was something that was a core part of your personality? Okay.
Okay, I can answer now.
Please.
Okay, good. So I recognized that I was an introvert after spending so much time in large groups or in social events. I would go home and I would be exhausted.
Okay.
And I would be very, very tired, and I needed time to recover before I went back out to that big, large group or, social networking or whatever it might be where there were a lot of people. I needed time to recharge, and I knew that my time to recharge was by myself, reading or doing something just in quiet.
Okay, great answer. So how did that 10 seconds of time feel to you as an introvert?
Not bad at all, because it helps me get my thoughts together and organized in a way to where when it comes out of my mouth, I feel like, this is exactly how I feel and think. Yeah.
Thank you. You just actually exhibited a point very clearly that I wanted to make. That one of the telltale signs of introverts is that they often, when they say something, it's their final word. So they say it and they mean it. Whereas extroverts, so I am an extrovert, although it took me a while to come to that conclusion. People who know me well think that's hilarious that I ever thought I was an introvert. But one of the things about the 10-second test is that to an introvert, that feels like a great amount of time. And to an extrovert, it feels painful.
Got it.
So I wanted to do things like say like, well, let me rephrase the question, or did you understand here? Let me give you an example. So they really try to fill in the space because silence can be uncomfortable because they always think out loud. Extroverts always think out loud. But thank you for answering that. So that was perfect. So that's a really good way, I think, for people to kind of test out and feel out whether or not where they fall on the spectrum. And when I say where they fall on the spectrum, I also want to just talk for a minute about some subtleties in there. So ambiversion. Okay. Have you heard of ambiversion?
I've never heard of ambiversion before.
Okay. This is fun. So ambiversion's extroversion and introversion work on a scale.
Yes.
So some people can fall really far on the extroversion scale, and those are probably going to be your great salespeople, people who are the life of the party. And then same on the other side of introversion, people who just could stay home all the time, never go out, and would be fine. There are a lot of people who fall closer to the middle, and so they actually need a good balance of both interacting with the external world and interacting with themselves and their thoughts to feel balanced in the world. So so that's really what ambiversion is, and I think I probably fall a little bit more toward the ambiversion, which is why I had a hard time figuring out where I was for a while.
I think a lot of people probably do. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I think there's some other things too that can complicate people's understanding of introversion and extroversion. So, for example, social anxiety, which a lot of people have social anxiety.
Absolutely.
An extrovert with social anxiety might think they're an introvert because they might avoid going to parties or avoid speaking in public or things like that. But really, when it comes down to thinking about how do I get my energy, how do I think, how do I process, and when I'm in groups or with my manager, those are some fundamental core things to go back to and really reassess and think about how you respond to those types of situations.
So it's really important to understand where you get your energy, where you're motivated. Some people are motivated in doing group discussions. Other people are motivated by thinking about it first and then coming to a group discussion, which is a lot like me. I like I like thinking about it and then going to a group discussion.
Yes.
So then, I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions on introversion and extroversion. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those misconceptions for both?
Sure. So I'll start with what introverts think about extroverts.
Yes.
Which kind of broke my heart a little bit when I realized this. But because extroverts tend to process externally. So if you were to ask me a question, I would start responding immediately, but my answer might not come for a little while. It might come in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes.
So we got to sit through the whole prelude.
So you have to sit through the whole disclosure. And also it might make me seem flaky or inconsistent because I might immediately answer one thing and end up at a different conclusion. So I think that, introverts understanding that that's really just extroverts doing the same thing that you do in your brain can help to be a bit more patient with that process. I think too, people think that extroverts are attention grabbing or narcissistic. Again, it's really just the way that their brain operates at its best. For introverts, and maybe you can relate to this, I think people tend to think that introverts are shy, that they're standoffish, that they're bad public speakers, that they won't make good teachers or things like that, which are just absolutely untrue. So there's no correlation between good public speaking and introversion or extroversion. Again, taking it back to energy and how you process.
And so, I really think that this is important in the workplace. But I'd like for you to tell us, why is this so important in the workplace?
So I think the main reason it's important in the workplace is that because extroverts are louder and they express more verbally, we have a tendency to create workplaces that cater to extroverts because they're more likely to speak up. And so we just think that's what everyone wants. We're also more likely to promote extroverts. So you find more extroverts in management positions because they're doing more things like social engagements outside of work or networking events. They're doing a bit more of that typically than introverts. An interesting point, though, is that introverts have been shown to be better managers than extroverts, primarily because their listening skills are better. So I think that basic understanding of, our workplaces are really catered to one type and not the other, and more than 40% of the population identify as introverts. So I think it's important for that reason. But for me, the most critical thing is that when you don't include introverts, when they don't feel included in the way we hold meetings or in the workplace, you experience brain drain, so you have all these wonderful ideas and you really don't get an opportunity to hear them because you're not providing them a way to share.
That's really important. And, as leaders, creating different avenues for employees to make contributions, meaningful contributions, is very, very important. So I think that's going to be helpful. And so, what can we do as leaders to find opportunities to bring out both the introverts and the extroverts. I don't want to say taming the extroverts, but making sure that there's a balanced work environment in how we get information across and how we share our ideas.
So it's funny that you say taming the extroverts, because that actually is one of the pieces of advice I would give to managers.
Okay, all righty.
So I think I call it managing the verbal expressiveness of the introverts on your team.
That's a nice way to say that.
But really, I do think, for example, in meetings, if you have status update meetings, what you'll often see is that if you ask people, who wants to go first, the extroverts will speak up, and then you know what happens. You run out of time before the introverts ever get to speak. So thinking about that, maybe being specific in who you would ask to speak first in a status meeting, or being a bit more strategic about that. I do think meetings are a great way to better include people. So agendas are great for everyone for a variety of reasons, but especially for introverts, because it allows them time to prepare and think about the topics that will be discussed in the meeting and come with ideas.
Good.
So I think that's a great way. Another way is to, introverts are not naturally great at brainstorming meetings. That tends to not be their forte. However, brainstorm meetings are not going to go away, and they're good for extroverts. And so one thing I would say to a manager is, if you have a brainstorming meeting, let it be okay if some people in your team don't speak up or share ideas. But have a plan for following up. So say to the people on your team who didn't share ideas, hey, I still want to hear what you think. Can we set up a few minutes tomorrow to regroup and allow you the chance to share the ideas? So I think that those are really some of the ways. The last thing I'll say about that is, extroverts love social engagements, interaction. There's fun committees, fun squads, all of that. It's really not the preferred activity for introverts. So allowing them the opportunity to bow out of some of those without making judgment about it, or maybe even better, telling the introverts, we're going to have social activities and I want you to plan them. And see what comes out of that. So they may come up with some really neat, different ideas.
Some great ideas, some really good ideas. And, speaking as an introvert, something that always helps me is understanding what the brainstorming will include, or what the meeting will include prior to the meeting, so that I have an opportunity to think about it and then contribute fully in the meeting. So that's always very helpful. So thank you for that.
And actually, I want to add one other thing about being a good leader, and I think that's, if you're managing someone, making sure that, for example, if you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, that you give them a bit of warning about that. So, you might say, hey, I really have something that I'd like to talk to you about related to XYZ. Can you let me know before the end of the day when you'd like to talk about that this week? And so that gives people an opportunity to say, like, it's not a good time. I need to think about this before we meet one-on-one.
Good. Well, Claire, these were some amazing tips and amazing tool, 10-second test, to help determine whether or not you are an introvert or an extrovert. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. This was great.
And thank you, Facebook, for joining us on this Human Intelligence series on introverts and extroverts. So have a great evening.